Hey guys, it's Drew again. I watched a video actually this morning by my good friend Terry at TJ Maxx Vintage Cards and Nostalgia, and he was just kind of telling his story about some of his youngest memories of back when he was a young boy in New York State, and some of his connections to baseball and the Yankees, his favorite team, and just some different memories he had. And as I watched it, I was really inspired and just remembering. I was doing it myself going back. And he asked in the comments, what are some of the favorite things you remember as a kid, and which team did you connect with first? And while I did respond to him, I thought, you know what, I want to do a quick video. And so this is not just to copy him. This is kind of just a follow-up for what he did in my story. And I've told some of these or parts of some of these stories before, but kind of bear with me a little bit. So I grew up in the Northeast, mainly in the New York City area, outside in New Jersey. And if you may remember from previous videos, my dad grew up in New York City and was a Giants fan. And of course, like all Brooklyn and Giants fans, when teams moved west, he was heartbroken and kind of fell away from it. At that point, he was getting towards the end of high school, but when the Mets came into town, he kind of cheered for him, and he became a Mets fan. But he wasn't a super Mets fan. My grandfather kind of did the same, but stuck with the Giants, even though they were in San Francisco. But my dad's younger brother, my uncle, he was the rebel, and as a kid, he followed the Dodgers, and which was probably not the best thing in the house, but anyway, that's what he did. And then when they left, he ended up kind of switching over to the history of the Yankees fans and becoming a Yankees fan. Anyway, in the late 70s, when I was a little kid, my uncle took me and my brother to our first baseball game, and we went to Yankee Stadium. It was about 1978. And went to see. Now, I knew what baseball was, but I didn't follow it. I didn't have any favorite players. I was pretty young at the time, probably 6 years old. And I didn't follow it. But I remember my uncle telling me about two specific players. First was Reggie Jackson. The fact that the Yankees got the great Reggie Jackson, and they were destined to win all these championships or whatever. This was in 1978, so it was, of course, the year they won. And also, just becoming this great team in the late 70s, and taking advantage of free agency like no other team at the time. And then the second player was Thurman Munson, and my uncle really, really loved Thurman Munson. I think it was just something about not just his play, but his scrappiness, his demeanor, and the way he played. And he told me about Thurman Munson. And so I'm going to show you this card. This is the Reggie Jackson from 1978, and I've told the story. This is the first set of baseball cards I'd ever seen in my life. And I remember very specifically this card. Now, you've seen this card before, I know, but this card, as you can see, is in terrible shape. I mean, it's got snowing, it's got rounded, not even rounded quarters. I mean, there's almost no corners on it. It's faded, but forget all that. Just look at the image. I mean, Reggie Jackson, that huge swing. It's got that great shield up top, being an all-star. It just shows the determined, his power, going down on one knee like he did. And I loved this set. I still love this set. The nostalgia of this set is just amazing to me because of the Yankees, or not just the Yankees, but the team script. And one thing I remember very specifically was the fact that this was the year that they put the game on the back. And my brother and I used to play the game with this card, or with these cards. So I have just a very dear connection to 1978 Topps because of these cards. And of course, Reggie Jackson was one of the only players I'd ever heard of because of my uncle. So I loved this card specifically. And I don't have the Thurman Munson in front of me. I do have it in the set, but I do remember. And I remember when Thurman Munson died in a plane crash the next year, and feeling a sadness. Terry talked about it in his video as well. And I didn't know why I was sad. I didn't know him. I didn't follow games like watching or understanding because I didn't have the opportunity to. But I do remember that event as a very young child, as something that had happened, probably because my uncle was very saddened by this. Anyway, fast forward a couple of years. We had moved a few times, still in the New York area, and I was in middle school, and I had a paper route, and I became obsessed with statistics in baseball and what was going on. And at the time, now the Yankees were not very good. Uh, and the big team, of course, was the Mets were getting these young prospects coming up. And I became a huge fan of the Mets. I followed the Mets. I love the Mets, and I remember watching. This was '85. Darryl Strawberry. He was Rookie of the Year a few years earlier, and just a phenom. He could hit these huge home runs. I mean, they were just towering home runs. And at that point, the company that my dad was working for had box seat tickets. So I would go to probably 3 or 4 or 5 games at Shea Stadium every year. And I remember Dale Strawberry. Our seats were on the first base side, so of course him being left-handed, I could watch him, and I'd watch the ball go that direction as I was sitting there. And I remember that so well, Darryl Strawberry. And but who I really loved was this young kid, because he was only a few years older than me, is the way I thought about it. In Dwight Gooden. I mean, he was 19 years old, and I didn't realize at the time the numbers he were putting up compared to history were just insane. I mean, 24-4 with a 1.53 ERA in 1985, and he was only 19 years old. It's just insane what he was putting up. But my favorite player, and I don't know why, probably a number of reasons, but the favorite player that I loved was outfielder Mookie Wilson. And I love Mookie Wilson because you can see it very well on this card. He always had a smile on his face. He was intense. He was a base stealer. You didn't know what he was going to do. He was a leadoff hitter, and I just loved it. His name was fun, Mookie. I mean, I loved Mookie Wilson. I loved watching him play. At the end of every game, his uniform was dirty, and that's where I really started to fall in love with players that had a passion about the game, that went out there and got dirty, and they may not have been the superstars like these two, but I mean, he was a player that I absolutely loved. So I want to thank Terry for doing his video. Go check his out if you haven't seen it yet. He's got a much more detailed and probably better put together video. I'm just rambling at this point. But those are some of the memories that I had as a kid of loving a team and falling in love with a team, following them daily, and getting passionate about baseball as a game. And that's transpired over the years and decades into what I have now, which is a huge baseball history fandom that I have. Love reading about baseball history and just the different players that impacted it. And not just the superstars, the guys that are Hall of Famers like Reggie Jackson, but the guys that were next to them and played with them. And that's why I love players like Carl Erskine, if you've heard my stories on Carl Erskine. But anyway, I wanted to share this kind of quick story, show a couple of cards off. Unfortunately, none of these cards are from my childhood. I don't have any cards left over from my childhood. But when I got the 1978 set and put it together, a number of cards were given to me, including a lower grade, including this Reggie Jackson. And this card, in the condition that it's in, looks like the card that I had as a kid, as far as beat up and chewed and loved and flipped and everything else. And that is proudly in my 1978 collection, even though I could upgrade it for just a few dollars. I would never get rid of this card, because this card itself reminds me of my baseball childhood and my love and the start for the game. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And until next time, you guys be good.